Welcome to Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan El-Rom.
And I'm Rebecca Rand.
In our top story, the African Muslim nation of Sudan is moving forward with plans to normalize ties with Israel. United States President Donald Trump announced that after Khartoum makes reparations to U.S. terror victims and their families for the bombings of the American embassies in Kenya and Tanzania, he will remove the country from the list of state sponsors of terrorism. This will pave the way for Sudan to establish formal and direct ties with the Jewish state. The Sudanese government has excitedly welcomed President Trump's announcement, and a top Muslim cleric in the country has written a fatwa in support of establishing relations with Israel. Sheikh Abdel Rahman Hassan Hamed wrote that as a general principle from an Islamic standpoint, there's no opposition to salam or peace with Israel. His message was publicized by the Arab Council for Regional Integration, an organization fighting the Islamic taboo of contact with the Jewish state.
An Israeli delegation was hosted in Bahrain for the historic signing of peace agreements between the two countries. This follows the official signing of the Abraham Accords at the White House in September. A delegation of Israeli and American leaders took the first direct flight from Tel Aviv to Manama, where Bahraini leaders formally declared peace with the Jewish state. Emissaries from both countries signed 8 bilateral agreements, including a joint communique on the establishment of diplomatic, peaceful, and friendly relations. Israel's National Security Advisor Mir Ben Shabbat spoke at the signing, saying, "We started this day as friends and we're concluding it as family, members of the family of Abraham." The Trump administration continues to make major strides in convincing Muslim nations to make peace with Israel. Unfortunately, the Palestinian leadership continues to do whatever they can to stand in the way. Yochanan has more on that.
Yes, Rebecca, the Palestinian Authority has found themselves on the outside as Arab states have begun to normalize ties with Israel. The PA refuses to negotiate with the Jewish state, and the fact that the Trump administration has been able to broker peace with 2 Gulf states in just a month has infuriated the Palestinian leadership. Fatah bosses have warned Arab countries that any visit to Jerusalem that is not coordinated with them is tantamount to an intrusion and will be rejected. Just last week, an economic delegation from the United Arab Emirates was accosted by Palestinians while they visited the Temple Mount. The Emirati team was forced out of the Al-Aqsa Mosque by Palestinians who called them trash.
The Israeli government has approved the gradual lifting of lockdown restrictions after 4 weeks of closures. There's been a drastic drop in morbidity, and the current cases of COVID-19 are the lowest reported in months. European nations are looking to Israel for guidance as the number of coronavirus cases are skyrocketing throughout the continent.
The chief negotiator for the Palestinian Authority was intubated in an Israeli hospital after suffering complications from coronavirus. Saeb Erekat was transferred from his home in Jericho to Hadassah Ein Kerem Hospital in Jerusalem at the request of the Palestinian Authority. His medical care, at the expense of Israeli taxpayers, caused a bit of a controversy in the Knesset. Some lawmakers cited the fact that Erekat has incited terror on numerous occasions, and as a leader of the PLO, he is complicit in the deaths of Israelis. They also raised the issue of Israeli hostages and the bodies of 2 kidnapped IDF soldiers being held in Gaza, saying they should be returned before Israel offers life-saving treatment to the arch-terrorist.
Israel's ambassador to the United Nations slammed the recent appointments of China, Russia, Pakistan, and Cuba to the Human Rights Council. Gilad Erdan pointed out the hypocrisy of electing countries which hold atrocious records of human rights violations to the body whose task is to defend human rights. He said these elections prove once again that this council has nothing to do with protecting human rights and everything to do with violating them. Erdan cited the UNHRC's obsession with Israel, saying since 2006 the Council has adopted 90 resolutions condemning Israel, more than all the resolutions against Syria, North Korea, and Iran combined.
Iran has announced that the United Nations arms embargo has expired and the fanatical Shiite country is now ready to buy and sell weapons on the open market. Tehran already supplies its network of proxy armies and terror groups throughout the Middle East as part of its campaign to destabilize the region. Iran's capabilities would only increase if they are allowed to freely buy and sell military equipment and weapons. The White House released a statement saying that the arms sales to Iran would violate UN resolutions and warned of sanctions against any country that trades with the rogue Islamic Republic.
France continues to struggle with Islamic extremism and terrorism. Last week, a civics teacher accused of insulting Mohammed was decapitated in the streets of a Paris suburb. This blatant act of Islamic terror comes just days after French President Emmanuel Macron announced major reforms to help stave off extremism in French schools and mosques. Macron visited the site of the beheading and said, "One of our fellow citizens was murdered today because he advocated freedom of expression to his students."
Israel and Lebanon have begun historic negotiations over their maritime borders, which was complicated by the Lebanese delegation's refusal to speak directly with the Israelis. Beirut is at war with Jerusalem. It refuses to recognize the Jewish state and has downplayed the negotiations as indirect and technical. The hour-and-a-half meeting was mediated by America's ambassador to Algeria, John DeRocher, at the UNIFIL headquarters near the border between Israel and Lebanon. News sources in Beirut claim the Lebanese delegation did not address the Israelis personally and refused to be photographed with them. Both countries want to drill for natural gas in a contested area beneath the Mediterranean. And until a compromise is reached, neither Jerusalem nor Beirut can explore for resources there. A source in Israel's energy ministry estimates that every year that the dispute remains unresolved, each country loses billions of dollars.
The Israeli Defense Forces have destroyed 2 Syrian military installations in a daring cross-border raid. The IDF disclosed that soldiers from the Nahal and Yalom units crossed from the Golan Heights into Syria, destroyed the Syrian army posts, and slipped back into Israel undetected. This mission is in response to the Syrian military's increasing presence in the buffer zone, which not only violates international agreements, it threatens the safety of Israeli citizens.
The Islamic State terror group has called on its followers to attack Saudi Arabia over what it views as Riyadh's warming ties with Jerusalem. The radical terror group accused the kingdom of supporting normalization with the Jewish state by allowing Israel the use of its airspace. In a recorded message, Islamic State spokesman Abu Hamza al-Muhajir instructed his operatives to start by hitting and destroying oil pipelines, factories, and facilities which are the source of income for what he termed the tyrannical Saudi government.
The U.S. presidential elections are quickly approaching, and Americans living in Israel are gearing up for the vote. Election experts believe that there are about 250,000 eligible voters in Israel whose ballots must be cast before the official election on November 3rd. Campaigning for both candidates has shifted into full gear, but the president's supporters have been much more visible than that of his opponent. Trump supporters have been seen wearing T-shirts and masks with his name written in Hebrew, and Republicans abroad organized a van with the slogan, "We've got to thank President Trump," which has been making the rounds through the crowded streets of Tel Aviv, prompting whistles, horn honking, and shouts of support.
A biblical 2-shekel weight has been discovered near the Western Wall. The ancient limestone measuring device was found during sifting underneath Wilson's Arch adjacent to the Kotel. Mordechai Eliav, the director of the Western Wall Heritage Foundation, said the find was exciting as it was discovered during the Hebrew month of Tishrei, whose symbol is the scales of justice. He said now, when the Western Wall is so restricted due to the coronavirus pandemic, this discovery strengthens the eternal connection between the Jewish nation, Jerusalem, and the Western Wall, while offering us all encouragement. We are living in mysterious yet miraculous times. We've witnessed the most remarkable fulfillment of biblical prophecy, the Jewish people's return to Israel, and the prosperity and contributions of this tiny country in such a short time. Yet we've also seen an unexpected rise in anti-Semitism, which takes the form of anti-Zionism and alliances between groups that are fighting against the most fundamental biblical values. In the book Titus, Trump, and the Triumph of Israel, Josh Reinstein answers important questions to clarify what has driven political action from the time that the Roman Emperor Titus destroyed Jerusalem until today, when President Trump recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital. Get your copy today and learn how faith-based diplomacy has changed the world. To order your advance copy, go to triumphofisrael.com.
That concludes the news portion of our show. Please stay tuned for Ask the Source with Josh Reinstein.
Hello and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host Josh Reinstein and we're here in our beautiful studio in Jerusalem. My guest today is Bobby Brown. He's the Vice President of Ariel University. Bobby, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you for inviting me, Josh.
Bobby, you're a legend here in Israel. You've been involved in everything from Aliyah to Holocaust restitution. You've been an advisor to Prime Minister, but now you're focusing your time in building Ariel University. Tell us a little about Ariel University.
Well, Ariel University is really the most important institution in Judea and Samaria. It's the only institution that serves the entire country. We have 16,000 students, and we've created the newest and most interesting university in Israel.
You know, this is an exciting story. It was the first university to be recognized in Samaria. Can you tell us a little about that?
We felt that Judea and Samaria are really the heartland. There is now almost 500,000 Jews living there. We have a student body that consists of settlers, people who live in the area, Arabs, some who live in the area and some who live in other parts of Israel, and Israelis. We are now the second most popular engineering institution in this country.
It's unbelievable. I was just there recently with you, and when I first went there, a decade ago, it was kind of like caravans. Now it looks like a beautiful, huge university. How did you build it so fast?
Well, first of all, we've had a lot of support from the government, support from Jews, support from Christians. And people recognize that we are the biggest employer, we are the most incredible institution coming up with new patents, new ideas. All kinds of interesting things are happening at Ariel, and it's become more and more popular.
You mentioned the innovation, and it's really amazing. I saw, you found seeds from the time of King David and has been being able to recreate the wine from the time of King David. You have supercomputers there. Tell us about some of the innovation that we're seeing at Ariel.
In almost every department, we want to excel. We want to be the best. And in almost every department we are. We have a particle accelerator. You know, the famous one in CERN that's 70 miles long. We have one that's about 2 meters in size. And we've become the world's expert on small particle accelerators. One of the things they're doing now is they're seeing if we can replace radiation therapy for people who have cancer with electron therapy. Radiation therapy destroys both good cells and bad. And what we do with electrons is they put it from 2 different directions, and it only becomes destructive when they meet, so they can be on the tumor. We have our engineering. The other day I went and I saw they have a shrinking car. You can shrink your car to fit a parking space. Okay, how popular would that be?
Now, it's really unbelievable. Ariel is known, though, to receive a lot of support from Bible-believing Christians. The whole city, actually, a lot of it has been built because Christians have invested there. Are they partnering with Ariel University?
It's a growing relationship. We recently formed a partnership with Liberty University. They have many things that can help us. We have many things that can help them. And we feel that faith-based university will be our friends in good times and bad times. We are the biggest employer in Judea and Samaria. We have attracted professors. Our new rector is a professor who left Tel Aviv University to be with us. So people are nervous because we're just growing so fast and doing so much. We now have the Miri and Sheldon Adelson Medical School, which 53% of Israeli doctors had to go abroad to get training. So now 100 of them every year will be able to study and get their degrees and their doctor's certificate from Ariel.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting idea. Are there such thing as Bible-believing Christians coming and studying in Israel? Is that something that the university is thinking about opening up to, maybe an overseas program?
We have 2 overseas programs. We have in English. We have an overseas program in archaeology and one in business administration. We also have a large number of people studying for their PhDs who have a special program designed for them by our professors dealing in their subject in English. So we realize there's a demand. We realize it's important. One of the reasons we partnered with Liberty is because they have an excellent long-distance learning program, and we'd like to learn from their program.
Yeah, you are no stranger to Judea and Samaria. You're one of the founders of Tekoa. What's it like living in the heartland of Israel?
Well, people ask how old is Tekoa, and I usually say 2,000 years old. It's the home of the prophet Amos. It's a incredible place. We took it, when I came, there were 7 families, and today we are the largest community in Gush Etzion, in that area. We are the largest community. We have about 1,300 families, and we're growing. And any house that's built or any plot that opens up immediately has, we have to do a lottery just to figure out who can live there.
You get to witness the fulfillment of biblical prophecy every day. You get to see the vineyards of Amos from your window in your home. How is Ariel University also a fulfillment of prophecy?
Well, I can see the vineyards of Tekoa, and then I can see the wine from Ariel. The prophecy was that the Jewish people are going to come back, and the Jewish people are going to replant their gardens and rebuild their cities. And I've been privileged to be involved and watch that happen. And you can't have a city without a university. You can't have a city without a medical school. We are now building a medical center with all of the needs of the area, Jews and Arabs. We will have staff who will be Arabs and Jews, and we will have patients who will be Jews and Arabs.
So what's the future of Ariel University?
Future of Ariel is to be the biggest and best. And we're now discussing with Israel's primo college of sport, Wingate, the idea of cooperating together. And our dream would be to have a sports university under Ariel dealing with sport. We look at other universities and see what's missing. And that's what we want to go into. Only things we can be best, or the only ones. We work with industry. We work with a leading pharmaceutical company, Teva. Just came to us and opened up an area of laboratories with the promise that the most promising students will get jobs in Teva when they finish their degrees.
Amazing. Bobby, there are literally tens of millions of people watching this show. What message do you have for our viewing audience?
There are very few things you can do that are biblical in nature. You can study the Bible, that's certainly important, but in Ariel you can participate in building the prophecies of God, building the prophecies that we believe in, that you believe in, and helping to create a Judea and Samaria again where the laughter of Jewish children will be heard all over. Thank you, Josh.
Thank you, Bobby, for being on the show, and thank you for tuning in to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. Now back to the studio.
Up next, the return to Zion with Karen Hayesod.
Shalom, and welcome to the Return to Zion with Keren HaYesod. I'm Sam Grunberg, World Chairman of Keren HaYesod United Israel Appeal, the leading official fundraising organization for the State of Israel. Due to the rise of anti-Semitism, the Jews of France are coming to Israel like never before. You will now witness the fulfillment of biblical prophecy. God bless you from Jerusalem.
Bring my sons from afar and my daughters from the ends of the earth.
Both the departure from France and the reception at Ben Gurion Airport were colorful and festive events, full of hope for the future. The reception at Ben Gurion had the feel of a homecoming celebration, with flags and greetings, designed to convey to the Olim that they have come home and that everything possible would be done to guarantee a promising future for them and their children, and to ease their absorption. It began with the receiving Israeli ID cards already at the airport, and will continue with the help of a special program designed to streamline the bureaucratic process in the fields of employment, education, and housing.
אתם 206 עולים חדשים, אבל תחשבו כל אחד מכם סוגר מעגל של 2,000 שנה. עשרות דורות של סבים וסבתות שלכם התפללו, לחמו, חלמו, ואתם עשיתם את זה.
אתם זוכרים, לפני שבועיים היינו בפריז, נפגשנו שם. נתן שירנסקי, אני, מודי זנדברג וכולם. ומה אמרנו? אנחנו נקבל אתכם בבית. הבית משותף של כולנו, מדינת ישראל.
אני רוצה לברך אתכם בשם משפחת קרן היסוד העולמית. זה רגע מרגש עבורכם וגם עבורנו. המדינה הזאת שייכת לכולנו. לא משנה איפה אתה גר, כחלק מהעם היהודי, ישראל היא המולדת שלך. קרן היסוד מגייסת תרומות, ויחד עם הסוכנות היהודית, השותפה שלנו, ומשרד הקליטה, אנחנו עוזרים לחלום הציוני להתגשם.
The Jewish community of France is the largest in Europe, numbering 500,000 Jews.
On est des vrais sionistes, on adore Israël et que c'est pas par peur ou voilà, c'est vraiment par envie parce qu'on avait envie de vivre ici, on avait envie de vivre en Israël.
Je suis très émue et je réalise pas. J'ai du mal à réaliser parce qu'on préparait ça depuis des années.
Beaucoup de joie, une très grande émotion. J'ai énormément les larmes aux yeux. Et j'espère que tout le monde pourra réaliser ce rêve un jour.
Un projet de vie, ça fait depuis qu'on est mariés, c'était notre projet de monter en Israël.
Je trouve que c'est très impressionnant d'arriver dans un nouveau pays dans lequel on se dit on va arriver, on connaît entre guillemets personne, seul, et au final c'est impressionnant, parce qu'on n'est pas seul et c'est vraiment, c'est beau. Il n'y a que Israël pour faire ça, c'est vraiment... voilà.
Mesdames et messieurs, le Premier ministre de l'État d'Israël, M. Bibi Netanyahu.
Bonjour tout le monde, bienvenue en Israël. יש פה קהילה מפוארת של יהודים שעלו מצרפת, הם יחבקו אתכם ויקבלו אתכם, אבל כל העם יקבל אתכם. אנחנו אוהבים אתכם, אנחנו מעריכים את המעשה הציוני שעשיתם, שהוא גם מעשה אישי. הוא מעשה אישי גדול ומעשה לאומי גדול.
Due to the coronavirus pandemic, we're expecting a massive wave of aliyah from Jewish communities all around the world. Help us bring them home, and let's bless Israel together.
To donate and get information, visit khisrael.org.
Well, today we usher in a new era of peace between Israel and the Arab world. I just came from an historic virtual conference between myself, President Donald Trump, and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Zayed of the United Arab Emirates. We announced the establishment of a full and formal peace between Israel and the UAE. It includes the mutual opening of embassies, direct flights, and many other bilateral agreements. This is the greatest advancements toward peace between Israel and the Arab world in the last 26 years, and it marks the third formal peace between Israel and an Arab nation. In 1979, Prime Minister Menachem Begin made peace with Egypt. In 1994, Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin signed a peace treaty with Jordan. And today I'm honored to announce a formal peace agreement with the United States, with United Arab Emirates. I believe there's a good chance we will soon see more Arab countries joining this expanding circle of peace. I want to thank President Trump for his critical help in brokering this historic accord. And I want to thank him for his revolutionary vision for peace, which is the most realistic and important formula for peace in the region. President Trump's Middle East plan served as a basis for today's historic peace announcement. Israel and the UAE are two of the most advanced countries in the world. Together, we'll transform the region and forge an even better future for our people. This is a future of peace, a future of security, and a future of prosperity. I've always believed that we could establish peace with the Arab world, and I've been working towards that lofty goal for decades. You may not know it, but I've been doing it all the time, in meetings that are publicized and in many that are not. In Washington, in the Middle East, in daylight, and at nighttime. In recent years, Israel, under my leadership, has made advancement with ties with such countries as Sudan, Oman, Bahrain, and other nations in the Gulf. I have reason to be very optimistic that today's announcement with the UAE will be followed by more Arab nations joining our region's circle of peace. And to the people of Abu Dhabi and its leader, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Zayed, I say, Salam alaikum, Shalom aleichem, peace unto thee, peace unto all of us. Thank you.
Lift up your eyes and look around. All your children gather and come to you. The biblical prophecy is unfolding right before our very eyes. The people of Israel are returning to the Promised Land after 2,000 years of exile. But millions of Jews are still longing to come home. Anti-Semitism threatens many of the Jews. We must rescue them before the window of opportunity slams shut. Bless Israel by supporting Keren HaYesod United Israel Appeal, the leading official fundraising organization for the State of Israel. Together, we can fulfill the prophecy of the Bible.
Let's bless Israel together.
To donate and get information, visit our website at www.khisrael.org.
That's going to do it for this edition of Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan El-Rom.
And I'm Rebecca Rand, reporting from our studio in Jerusalem. Please join us next week for all of your Israel updates.